Hey there, it's your friendly school librarian, Ms. Pfeiffer, and I have 3 books I'm excited to tell you about. They just happen to be on this year's Oregon Battle of the Books reading list for 3rd through 5th graders, but more about that later. All 3 books have a few more things in common. One, they're all about characters that have to take on a false identity or deceive someone in order to survive. 2, all involve characters who are forced to leave their old life behind. And 3, all 3 are historical fiction books. I know you're thinking, historical fiction? Why do I want to read a dusty old book? Yeah, don't worry. These aren't old books. They're adventures set during a real time period or place in history, which means at least part of each story really happened. And you get a front row seat to watch it unfold without being shot at yourself. So you get a great story and some real facts you can talk to your older relatives and their friends about. So come on, let's find out about these books. The first book is called Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. This book is based around true events in Denmark during World War II, and it's about 10-year-old Anne-Marie Johansen, who lives in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1943, and the Nazis are occupying her country. It's not fun. There are food and fuel shortages and soldiers with guns at every corner. But things are about to get a whole lot worse. Rumor has it that the Nazis want to take away all the Jews. Her best friend, Ellen Rosen, and her family are Jewish, and they're scared. Anna Marie doesn't get it at first. When they say take away, they talk about relocation. And to her, relocate means move to somewhere new. But her parents explain that it probably means being taken to a Nazi work camp or death camp. And people don't come back from there usually. Hitler believed that only pure Germans had rights, and anybody who wasn't a pure German, then they didn't have rights. Think about in the Harry Potter series, where there's some characters who treat non-wizards differently and call them muggles, and you'll kind of get the idea. So, Anna Marie's parents have a plan. They're going to hide her friend Ellen in plain sight as just another sister to Anna Marie and her little sister Kirsty. Her dad thinks it's going to be fine, that the Nazis aren't going to bug them and won't question them. But that very night, they come knocking on the door, and things almost go really wrong until Anna Marie thinks really quickly and grabs and hides Ellen's Star of David necklace that would prove that she's a Jew and not their sister. And she hides it, and just in time. But that was too close of a call. Meanwhile, there's an underground resistance group that are against the Nazis, and they know it's time to make a move. They've got to get the Danish Jews out of Denmark or they're not going to survive. The book goes so much faster after this point. What happens is the country next door across the channel in Sweden is neutral. So they need to get all of the Danish Jews across the channel at night on fishing boats to get them safe. So, will Anna Marie and her family and others be able to save the Rosens and the other Jews? What would you do if you were Anna Marie? Would you help? Not help? What could you do? Find out if Ellen ever gets her necklace back. Check out Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. The second book I wanted to tell you about is Riding Freedom by Pam Munoz Ryan, with drawings by Brian Selznick. And yes, this is the audiobook version, but of course it's available as a book too. It partially takes place during the California Gold Rush, which started in 1848. This story is more of a personal journey of Charlotte Parkhurst, who was orphaned at age 2 when her parents died of a wagon accident, and she had to go live in an orphanage. While the other orphans, mainly boys, were slowly adopted out, The mean cook on staff locked Charlotte away in a closet when families came to adopt. The only thing that kept Charlotte going was working with the horses, the stable manager, and hanging out with a younger orphan, Hayward, or Hay, who she took care of because he was small and was always getting bullied. But then her favorite horse dies, and she's banned from the stables altogether, and Hay gets adopted. And Charlotte cannot stand the thought of staying another moment. So she concocts a secret plan. She'll run away, fake her drowning, and dress as a boy so no one will recognize her and drag her back. And she swears Hayward to secrecy, and she borrows some overalls from him, cuts her hair, and she runs away. She promises to come find him once she's got her own ranch and horses. As you might know, in the late 1840s, a lot of times women weren't allowed to own any property. They weren't allowed to vote, and they and girls were not allowed to do what was considered boys' or men's work. So that included working with horses. But somehow Charlotte, now in her disguise as Charlie, convinces the stable owner to give her a job. From there, she convinces him to train her as a coach driver, driving 6-horse teams, taking customers wherever they need to go. If anyone ever figured out she was female, they would take her job away immediately. But how long could she keep this deception up? She makes it out to California, where she's supposed to drive coaches along a route between Stockton and Mariposa, California, transporting gold miners. That way she thought she could make enough money to get that ranch of her own. But before she even starts, she gets kicked in the head by a mule and loses sight in one eye. Her new boss refuses to let her drive anymore. It's just not safe. So what is Charlie, or Charlotte, going to do? Read the book to find out what happens to Charlie and to the real Charlotte, who is also known as One-Eyed Charlie, in Writing Freedom by Pam Munoz Ryan. So the third book, Paper Wishes, by Lois Sepabon, is set during the beginning of World War II. I don't know if you can see this, but I actually have it on Libby from Library to Go from the public library on my phone. But this is set in the U.S., not in Europe or Asia, but in World War II in the U.S. You may not know this, but during World War II, the United States relocated people they considered enemies into internment camps. Interning someone means to put them in a prison or a jail. During World War II, Japan, Germany, and Italy were considered the United States enemies, and President Roosevelt went so far as to order all Japanese Americans, even though they were legal American citizens, to live in internment camps. So that's what happens to 10-year-old Japanese American girl Manami in Paper Wishes. She and her parents and grandfather are forced to leave their home on Bainbridge Island off the coast of Washington and move to Manzanar, a camp in the dusty southeastern California desert. They're only allowed to take what they can carry. She tries to smuggle her dog, Eugene, out with her, but guards find the dog just before they get on the train, and they take the dog away. And she and her grandfather are heartbroken. So nobody in her family or at the camp is really happy once they get there, because their living quarters are really small and cramped, and some of them are made from old horse stables. And it's really hard for her family to adjust, because the dusty environment is really hard to handle after living in the moist island climate off Washington State. And Manami stops talking from day one at the camp. Her family blames it on the dust, but she knows her grandfather is so sad because Eugene, their dog, was lost to them. She knows she is guilty of that happening. That is her secret. She's so upset she can't talk. The only way she does communicate is through her drawings once a makeshift school is opened. They don't have many supplies at all, but her teacher gives her paper and pencils. She writes letters to Eugene, hoping he will come to her. Other people are upset at the camp too, and her brother, who becomes a teacher at the camp, gets in the middle of those tensions. Will Minami ever talk again? Will her grandfather forgive her? Will she ever see her dog again? Read Paper Wishes to find out more and explore this part of our nation's history. And don't forget, all three of these books are part of this year's OBOB selections for 3rd through 5th graders. Find out more about that this fall when Miss Lisa at the public library starts up our local team. Team members read the books on the list, make up questions and quiz each other, sort of like Jeopardy, and then travel to Bend to compete against other school groups. Even if you don't want to officially try the OBOB competition, you can still read the books. We usually have most of them in our school library or can get them from other libraries in the SAGE system. And they're not all historical fiction. So what are you waiting for? Experience the heart-thumping fear of trying to rescue a friend from mortal enemies and Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. Ride horses and drive coaches in the Gold Rush era and Riding Freedom by Pam Munoz Ryan. Shadow, Minami, and her family in Paper Wishes by Lois Sepabon as they're forced to move somewhere totally different in wartime. No matter which one you read, you know you're going to be getting some true information along with your fiction. And as you read, think about whether this could happen today and what would you do if it did. Until next time, happy historical fiction reading. This has been a Hey Ms. Librarian production.